Ever taken a sip of coffee and thought, why do we call it a cup of Joe? Who is Joe? And why are we all drinking him? It sounds odd, right? But that everyday nickname for your morning brew might just trace back to the decks of a U.S. Navy ship. A story brewed in bitterness, banter, and boats. Let's dive in. To understand where the term came from, we need to rewind over a century. Picture this, the early 1900s. The world was shifting, technology, politics, warfare, and the Navy? It was the muscle of America's maritime power. Ships weren't glamorous. They were loud, hot, steel beasts. Days blurred into nights. Watches ran for hours. Isolation, boredom, and duty filled every crevice. In this harsh world, one thing kept sailors awake, alert, and maybe even sane: coffee. Coffee was served around the clock. It wasn't an option, it was essential. It was brewed in massive vats in the galleys. It flowed at all hours: midnight watches, early morning drills, stormy days in the Atlantic. It wasn't fancy. No cream, no sugar art, just dark, hot, and bitter. And that was just fine. Because for those sailors, coffee wasn't about flavor. It was about fuel. It kept you upright during endless shifts. It warmed your bones during cold nights on the water. And in a place where luxuries were few and far between, it became a comfort. A ritual. Enter Josephus Daniels. Then, in 1913, came a man named Josephus Daniels. He was appointed Secretary of the Navy under President Woodrow Wilson. Daniels had a vision. He believed the Navy should reflect American morals, strong, clean, and upright. And that meant ... no booze. In 1914, Josephus Daniels issued General Order 99, banning all alcoholic beverages aboard Navy ships. With one pen stroke, centuries of naval tradition vanished. No more rum rations. No more celebratory toasts. No more whiskey hidden in footlockers. Just coffee. For many sailors, it felt like a betrayal. Alcohol had long been part of Navy life, not just for pleasure, but for morale. Taking it away was like removing the soul of the ship. So how did they respond? They didn't riot, they didn't mutiny, but they did get creative. They started calling their strongest remaining drink, the one thing they still had, a cup of Joe. A sarcastic nod. A bitter jab, a tongue-in-cheek tribute to the man who forced sobriety on the sea. It wasn't just coffee anymore. It was rebellion in a mug. Sailors have always had a language of their own. From scuttlebutt to 3 sheets to the wind, Navy slang is rich, colorful, and often born from shared hardship. So it is not surprising that a phrase like "cup of Joe" would emerge from that unique world. And remember, sailors travel the globe. When a phrase takes root in the Navy, it spreads from ship to port, port to pub, and soon into popular culture. By the 1930s, "cup of Joe" had made its way into the American lexicon. It wasn't just sailor talk anymore. It was everyone's coffee. But is the Josephus story true? Now here's the twist. Some linguists and historians don't buy the Josephus Daniels theory. They argue the timeline doesn't quite line up. "Cup of Joe" as a phrase didn't appear in print until the 1930s, nearly 2 decades after the booze ban. So where else could it have come from? One theory says it's simply an abbreviation. Joe equals Java. Just another way of saying coffee. Another suggests that Joe was slang for the average American guy. Think G.I. Joe, Joe Sixpack, or Joe Public. By that logic, a cup of Joe just meant a regular guy's drink. Unpretentious, reliable, accessible. It wasn't an elite beverage. It wasn't champagne or wine. It was coffee for truck drivers, factory workers, soldiers, students, and yes, sailors. So maybe it had nothing to do with Josephus Daniels at all. Still ... the Navy's version? Way more fun. Sure, the linguistic argument is strong. And maybe the Josephus connection is more myth than fact. But here's the thing. The Navy version feels true. It's got character, conflict, sarcasm. It tells a bigger story about life at sea, about rules and rebellion, and about how people cope with change. And let's be honest, Java becoming Joe isn't nearly as satisfying as sailors trolling a government official with coffee slang. Sometimes folklore is more powerful than fact. Coffee culture in the Navy today, regardless of the phrase's exact origin, the Navy's role in spreading coffee culture is undeniable. Even today, the Navy runs on caffeine. Modern ships are equipped with brewing stations in nearly every department. Coffee is brewed 24/7, a constant companion on the bridge, in the engine room, and in the mess halls. On submarines, where day and night blur into endless cycles, coffee helps sailors keep track of time, mentally and physically. It's part of the rhythm of military life. You drink it to wake up, to stay sharp, to bond. And in high-stress moments during storms, emergencies, or long missions, that bitter, black liquid becomes an anchor. For some, it's sacred. A pause in the chaos, a taste of normal. Coffee as ritual, rebellion, and comfort. Coffee in the Navy is more than just a stimulant. It's a shared language, a ritual of connection. A junior sailor pours for the chief. A late-night watch officer clutches a mug while staring into radar screens. Crews swap stories over mugs between drills. And maybe, just maybe, every time they take a sip, there's still a tiny spark of rebellion in it. A flicker of resistance to rules and restrictions. A nod to the past, to Josephus Daniels, to the men who turned a cup of coffee into a legacy. So why do we call it a cup of Joe? Maybe it was because Josephus Daniels banned alcohol. Maybe it's just slang for a regular guy's drink. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. But one thing's for sure, the phrase and the drink have stood the test of time. A cup of Joe today is a symbol of endurance, simplicity, and shared experience. It's part of how we wake up, how we cope, how we connect. It's in diners, in barracks, in offices, and in our hands every morning. And every now and then it's good to remember that behind that simple phrase is a complex story of sailors, sacrifice, slang, and a little caffeine-fueled defiance. If you enjoyed this dive into caffeine and history, do us a favor, like, comment, and subscribe for more untold stories like this. And let us know in the comments, are you Team Josephus, siding with the salty Navy legend? Or do you believe it's just a phrase for the everyday Joe, whichever camp you're in? Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay caffeinated, stay curious, and never underestimate what can happen over a cup of Joe.